What happens when you change a character entirely? So much so that it alters your entire perspective on the galaxy as you know it. When you change one seemingly small detail on one character's backstory. Well, we have some theories that you might find interesting. Welcome to Star Wars Uplink, your place for everything Star Wars gaming, the TV shows, and the movies. Each week we dive deep into two topics from the galaxy far, far away. We may have confirmation on Obi Wan Kenobi Season 2, as well as a mysterious new origin story for a fan favorite character.
Just you reconsider playing that message for him.
I just want to jump right into this. Obi Wan Kenobi sucked.
I think most of us would agree with that. If you don't agree, though, feel free to leave that hate in the comments and be like, no, it was the best show ever. Please let us know. Love to have our opinions changed on things like this, but yeah, no, definitely not the biggest fan of Obi-Wan.
But what does have me excited is there's a possibility for Season 2. Now, the reason I'm excited for Season 2, but did not like the first season, it seems a little strange, right? But we do have, I think there's a lot of things that could make this one better. One is Andor. Andor, I think, has just opened the eyes of so many of what could be Star Wars. It makes it a lot more approachable that, hey, here's a beloved character, or hey, here's a character that you know from this one movie. Let's flesh them out and give them even more depth and details and just heart-wrenching moments. And I would love to see that with Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
I think they failed massively with the first season. I think it was less an Obi-Wan Kenobi show and more of a Reva show. But for better or for worse, I think my problem is not with the character of Reva, though I do have some thoughts on that. My problem is more of they did this before where they use a fan favorite character to rope in and create a new character. They did that with Book of Boba Fett, and they did it again with this one. And I think to an even lesser degree because, well, Boba Fett was able to really... There were Boba Fett moments. There were very few Obi-Wan Kenobi moments in Kenobi.
Yeah, we've definitely probably talked to death about the characters in Obi-Wan Kenobi. But I would agree with you. I feel like having another season of it, extends the life of what Obi-Wan, the show is.
It gets into what you would think an Obi-Wan Kenobi show would be.
Yeah, it gets into, I feel like it would get into the meat of what they had initially intended it to be.
You would hope so after the ending of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Although at this point, they probably used all of their main points, maybe?
I
maybe
think
they'll craft something new?
I think if it's Obi-Wan, let's get into that.
Yeah.
Ewan McGregor has been making the rounds and has his own theories of what a Season 2 could be. It's not yet confirmed, but Ewan McGregor has once again said that he would be down to play the character again. He says this: I was so happy to do it again and so happy to work with Hayden again, and I hope we get the chance to do it again. I don't hope that him and Hayden get a chance to do it again because I think if they meet once, that's fine. I don't think it's as groundbreaking as a lot of people freaked out about, like, oh my gosh, it doesn't make sense for them. I would totally agree with that, but that wasn't my problem with it. I think flashbacks to him and Hayden would be good, even though, man, Hayden has not aged quite as well as Ewan McGregor has. Ewan McGregor's aged like a fine wine. But Ewan McGregor has been going around and talking about some of his theories on what it could be, and I think there's been a lot of discussion. One of the things that was around the discussion around Obi-Wan Kenobi, the writer Stuart Beattie said this, and I think this is an interesting detail. Commander Cody was supposed to be in Season 1, but they cut it, like many other things that was supposed to be in the Kenobi series or show, movie, sets of movies, whatever that whole background is. But, quote, I love the idea of Obi-Wan having a buddy on Tatooine, like a secret buddy. So that maybe is something that they could tie into with Season 2, with Commander Cody abandoning the Empire in Bad Batch. I think it would be really awesome to see Cody and Obi-Wan come together again.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure to what end, but that would be really exciting to see, and to see what end that would have,
Cody almost having like a redemption arc would be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
And ultimately come to be like, hey, Obi-Wan, I know we've had our differences. I know I tried to kill you, but it wasn't me. It was this chip in my brain. And I've come to remedy things almost, I think could be cool. And just to have someone from the old days back in there and have someone that Obi-Wan could connect to, I think, and understands what he's been through, I think would be good.
I feel like that's the redemption we were looking for in the first place. Like, there's this, I don't know, like, the first season just didn't quite hit how I would have liked to have seen it. And I feel like something like this actually could make it really compelling and really interesting.
But where could this season 2 go? Well, I think it could, and I hope it does, focus on that relationship of Obi-Wan and Qui Gon.
Yeah, it would have to.
And I would love to see more of that on Tatooine Western style storytelling where you have Kenobi that's trying to protect Luke at all costs and do these things where it's making Tatooine a more safe place for Luke to get raised on. And basically Luke's la 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 and Kenobi's in the background like doing all these things, learning a deeper connection of the Force. Maybe he is going to different locations to get more, I don't know, like knowledge, strength, connection to the Force, and really open up those doors that he closed off for so many years.
I'd really like to see him connect more with Tatooine itself.
Yes.
We've seen so much about like these hidden temples and things and rebels and stuff like that, and I would love to see something like that. And even him having these confrontations with Jawas and Sand People, like how he scares away the Sand People. Why would they be afraid of him? Obviously, something has happened. They know him. They understand. Don't mess with that guy. Would love to see that. Yeah. So I feel like there's a lot of potential still.
And I think there's so much nostalgia around Qui-Gon too, that I think, and you know, like season 1 had the whole like marketing campaign was around Darth Vader and Obi-Wan fighting off again. Like that was the whole marketing campaign that was on the flyers, the banners, the trailers. All of that was Obi-Wan, Darth Vader, the connection between those two things. I felt like they tried to do too much with that, but if you look at, like, you can just see the marketing campaign now, like Master and Jedi returned again, like reunited. And then you tie into the deeper aspects of the Force, because we haven't seen a whole lot of the Force in Star Wars, and especially the new Disney stuff.
And certainly not in live action.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of get it in like The Last Jedi a bit. You see it mentioned in The Rise of Skywalker, at least you have the books, but they don't dive any deeper into the whole mythology and religion of the Jedi, and they haven't done that probably since the Clone Wars. And this would be a perfect opportunity to really dive into more of the mythology around the Star Wars Jedi, and how is Qui-Gon communicating past death, and then ultimately learning that power for when he fights off against Darth Vader again.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty awesome story.
Would really love to see that connection, that deeper understanding of himself and the Force. And oh gosh, there's a lot there that would just be like, yes, give it to me.
Straight in the veins, give me that.
Yes, that would certainly give him the character growth that we need to see, like that path from where we see him in the first season to the old man, but truly like
accepted his lot in life and really saying, hey, I am a Jedi. This is my duty now, is to protect Luke, help him in the ways that I can without alerting anyone to his existence or his own existence. But I think there's a way that he can totally be the rogue assassin almost, or be the sheriff in town almost. Similar to how like Cobb Vanth or Mandalorian, like I think they do a really good job of tying in those really like fun Western experiences with Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars is a Western mixed with a samurai movie. When you boil it down to the genres that influence Star Wars the most, those are the two that have done so.
I mean, I might lean more towards the samurai movie myself, but
well, I mean, you look at Han Solo, like he is definitely the stranger in town kind of guy, or the person that's been in town for a while, don't mess with him.
Literally walking into a bar and then starting a bar fight, pretty much.
Exactly.
Yeah, you get it. You get it.
totally Western influence there. And then switching gears, we have the nostalgia around Kenobi.
Hello there.
I think there's a lot of nostalgia with a certain character named Darth Maul. And we have some very fascinating... It's kind of news, but it's just a revealing underneath the curtains around the thought process during the Clone Wars. And I'm really excited about this. Henry Gilroy, who did some of the writing on the Clone Wars and Rebels, was in an interview with Slash Film. And I want to lay this out first, and then I want to talk about how it could have affected the whole trilogy and the whole series of Star Wars, honestly. Quote, George was considering that Grievous was Maul behind the armor plate. It made sense. He's cut in half and he's in this robot body or whatever. Quote, I'm glad that Grievous is his own thing anyway, but I thought it was interesting that the concept guys almost talked George into that. Huh. So the concept artists were thinking of like, oh, it could be interesting. So, and I love this. I think you could totally see a fan theory.
Oh yeah.
If Maul wasn't dived as deeply as he was in both Clone Wars and the Rebels series, I think you could totally see, oh man, I could see back in the 90s all of the fan websites going around and with the blog posts of like, I have this great idea, this theory, what if Maul is actually Grievous? It makes so much sense. We don't see Maul anymore, but we see Grievous, and Grievous is this broken thing in this armor robotic shell, and he likes lightsabers, but is no longer force sensitive. Like, I could totally see that, like basically being fueled by his revenge or his trying to get to Palpatine, because he's not overtly fond, and as we see throughout that, Palpatine is constantly trying to get rid of one, Count Dooku, and Count Dooku made Grievous, basically. I mean, if you look in Legends, not necessarily, but kind of. If you look at Legends, Dooku sent Grievous on these incredibly impossible missions to slowly break him down and try to turn him into a machine.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
That's horrible.
Not necessarily like he would plot and set up these situations where Grievous would survive, but he would need some alterations.
Ew.
If you ever need some like super depressing lore to get into, go check out Grievous. My goodness. Check out on our channel, actually. We have a Grievous deep dive on some of the lore around him. But yeah, it's messed up. But I want to ask this, like, how would Star Wars have changed if Maul was Grievous?
Man, I feel like we would have all taken Grievous a little bit more seriously.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Man, oh gosh. I feel like Grievous would have just been that much more layered. Like, he would still be doing like this school thing, but like behind Dooku's back sort of thing. And then there would be like just all these like different like plans within plans within plans within plans sort of thing. Like there would have just been this much more sinister, much less robotic, like much more human thinking and like conniving. I felt like that's what Grievous was missing all along. Like he was just so machine.
I think too, a lot of our perception of Grievous comes from the Clone Wars, and the Clone Wars did him dirty.
They did.
Like honestly, they made him more of one of the main things is Dave Filoni didn't like Grievous. He doesn't like Grievous as a character, which is why he made the decisions to not put him into the positions that made him look very great. I mean, honestly, he's just a coward. And you have the whole thing of Anakin doesn't meet Grievous until the Revenge of the Sith. So you also have to have Grievous in the background of all these things. And because you remember in the Revenge of the Sith, he's like, oh, you're shorter than I would have expected.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he doesn't meet him until that moment. So there's a lot of like things that they have to do in the background to make it to where Anakin and Grievous never actually meet.
Goodness. I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Wow.
If you ever go, like, when we do our rewatch through the Clone Wars again, I'm going to have to take note of that. Like, oh, yeah.
Wow.
Not that Star Wars is beyond changing things up, because there was that line with Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, like, last I saw you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master, kind of thing. And then you look at the Kenobi show.
And they've met again. Right.
And was that really true? I don't know, but kinda, but not really, but kinda. That ultimately wasn't the case, but I think it's a fun thought process to theorize what a Star Wars trilogy would have been like if Grievous ended up being Maul.
What are your theories?
I think it would be fascinating on the whole. Let's just say this was, okay, so this is specifically in the discussions around the Clone Wars, where they do bring Darth Maul back. And I think it would have changed a lot of the Clone Wars in particular. Could you imagine a world where they did such a good job of redeeming Maul through the Clone Wars and doing, I think, the deeper levels of just like fandom around Maul and Grievous would have been fascinating to see. I think the stories that they would have told would have been much, much different. And then you look at the whole relationship between Ahsoka and Maul. What would that have been like if it was between Grievous and Ahsoka? I think that would have been wild. I don't think there would have been this whole like the relationship between Ahsoka and Maul is very fascinating because they work a lot together, but also against each other. And I don't think if Grievous and Maul were the same character that they would have done that.
Yeah, I definitely don't think Ahsoka would have even like considered it.
No.
She'd have been like, no.
You're a gross robot thing.
Yeah. Which is funny. It's funny to think of that kind of prejudice, and that's fascinating.
Yeah. Even though Maul is half robot with his legs and all that.
But just because he has a face.
And then the whole thing around Grievous not being force sensitive too. I think that's fascinating. Like, what does it look like when you're so beyond like who you were originally with the character of Maul? You've fallen down this shaft, you've gotten your legs chopped off, and now you don't even have a connection to the Force anymore. I think that's interesting to think about too, just from like the Force side of things.
And like Maul later on, like once he's put back together again, sort of thing, he's always kind of struggling with this madness within him. And I feel like he wouldn't have become this almost like philosopher kind of guy if he had become a Grievous instead. Like, I feel like he would have been so much closer to his madness than... Because
he would have lost all of his humanity, like he did when he became Spider Maul.
Yeah. And to lose your humanity as well as your Force connection, ooh. Like, that's severing too much. Like, there would be no coming back. So he would have been more like a Joker almost, like this kind of like chaos.
This
God.
madness.
Yeah.
I think because of the Clone Wars being made after the end of the prequels, I think that would be fascinating too, because we do see Grievous get killed by Obi-Wan. How uncivilized.
But how much more rewarding would that have been if that was Maul, you know? Like, oh, man. But...
Because they do have that back and forth, and we ultimately see that in Rebels, where we have that moment where everything comes to fruition. They have that standoff, and it's the end of their arc together. Yeah. What would that have been like? Like, what is that emotional moment in Rebels if Grievous had already been finished off? They can't bring him back again.
Right. Yeah, no, it would have been totally different.
I think that was such an emotional part of Rebels too.
Yeah.
That show would have been a lot less interesting if you didn't have that whole Obi-Wan and Maul arc.
Yeah, that was making me glued to it for most of it. So
and they keep on cutting in between the two. Like I think it's fascinating. It's one of those fun discussions of like a what if, and having it so far after the Clone Wars has ended, and the prequels were created, just have these little pieces of like deeper thoughts and discussions that were happening within Lucasfilm and George Lucas and him coming out of retirement to work on the Clone Wars is fascinating. It's really cool to think about the different thought processes during the creative journey with these things. I mean, if you look at the original, Maul was going to be a woman at one point and was going to be completely different, more towards like the, was it the Witch Sisters on Sisters of Dathomir? That was originally he was going to be more of like the Sisters of Dathomir kind of thing, and then they brought in this different character design. And you look at like all of the different concept art and what that could have been like. And if you look at that in terms of like even the sequel trilogy, the concept art for what was originally going to be the last movie when it was directed by Colin Trevorrow, it was going to be, there was a lot of interesting pieces there. But if you also look at the Rise of Skywalker and its concept art, there's some interesting pieces there too. So you can't necessarily judge the goodness of a thing based on the concept art.
Right.
But it's fun to look back at that and see all of the different moving parts and the different thought processes that they had while working on it.
Just to theorize what could have been and how one little thing could have changed the whole of like 3 different shows, you know?
Because we're looking at if Maul and Grievous were the same person, that's impacting Ahsoka's whole arc, Obi Wan Kenobi's soul arc, his relationship to the whole Force, the madness within changing Grievous's character entirely. Like just that one change could have changed Star Wars,
just about everything.
Clone Wars, Rebels.
Because that would have affected Rebels and therefore would have also probably affected Mandalorian because of what his role was in the Mandalore. And
yes. Yeah, there is true. The whole history of the Darksaber and Darth Maul.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. Like
There's
that's a whole different part too, because there is that whole arc of Ahsoka and Maul on Mandalore fighting over the Darksaber with the Mandalorians and that whole sect of people. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's a lot that Maul gets himself into. So
I mean, I think it's interesting. We talked about Maul possibly having his own series or something along the sides with that with Crimson Dawn. And you could totally see that as being, like, I would love to see that. But I think there's a lot of people out there that are looking at Maul and are like, we've heard his story, we've seen his story, we don't necessarily need more of it, which I think is an interesting change. But I think he is such an impactful character and has weaved his way through so many different moments within the Star Wars galaxy.
Truly, like almost all the way through, other than the original series.
Yeah, dying in Phantom Menace to having a huge impact into what Mandalorian is covering, and Ahsoka, and Obi Wan Kenobi, and Qui Gon Jinn, and all of these different moving pieces is wild to think about as a character that was on screen maybe 4 minutes total.
Yeah.
But I think they did such a good job of fleshing out his character. And something like I was reading an article and they were talking about how in Clone Wars they brought back a character, Maul, and made an incredibly fleshed out and interesting storyline with him. And then you look at Palpatine and how they did none of that when bringing him back.
Yeah.
So you look at the victories of bringing back a character that was once dead, and then you look at Maul and doing that fantastically, and you look at Palpatine and Rise of Skywalker and looking how poorly they did that. I think it's fascinating how you can have these the same decision yield very different results from the intention, because I think the team, both George Lucas, Dave Filoni, all of the people involved did a very good job of making that decision make sense and work within the boundaries of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Let us know your thoughts, though, on all of these details and secrets that are coming out. Would you like to see Obi Wan Kenobi Season 2? Would you like to see a Qui Gon Jinn moment? Do you want to see more of what we saw in the first season? Let us know in the comments below. And What's your theory? What would have happened if Maul and Grievous were the same person? I think that's just fascinating and just like a mind loop of like, oh my gosh, that would change everything. Let us know in the comments below, contact@uplinkpodcast.com. And hey, check out our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're listening to this on YouTube, check us out. You can start the podcast on YouTube. Listen to it wherever you find podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, all the fun places. And hey, if you're listening to this right now, we do a video version of the podcast where we have quotes, references, all kinds of fun edits and that kind of stuff that you can see visually. So hey, check us out. We'd love for you to join us and check out the YouTube channel with all of our clips, content, exclusive stuff there. I think it's a fun time. We're going to be doing some fun stuff coming up here soon. More streams are going to be happening as well. And hey, thank you for watching. As always, may the Force be with you.